Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 70.
Ooh, 70. That makes us sound old.
Wow, we do sound old, don't we?
We are old.
I remember back in the day, I had to podcast uphill both ways.
We're so old that Dave didn't even make it.
Oh, man, Dave.
Yes.
Dave. Captain, I'm going to be at every podcast from now on, and where is he?
He's ordering a pizza, I bet.
Without sauce and without chicken.
Without
bacon,
bread.
Without bread.
Definitely without bread.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
You know what? He conjured the pizza.
He did last time. It sounded disgusting, too. It was like a chicken barbecue pizza without the chicken.
Oh, it was buffalo chicken.
Buffalo chicken pizza
yes,
without the chicken.
Yep.
And then he was really upset because they put bacon on it. Yeah.
Is he now off the meat?
He is. He hasn't eaten meat like in 2 years.
Wow. You know, Charles from Sense Post and his wife made that decision as well. It's interesting.
I would die.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do it. You know, I really was hoping he was going to be here because I wanted to get him on the podcast to tell me, honestly, if he had hired a bot. You know that competition we had about Hornsby? I don't know if anyone has seen anything, but I mean, all of a sudden there was like 100 votes for him from random accounts.
Oh, he probably...
Yeah, that would not surprise me.
He's gaming the system.
So I actually emailed him. I'm like, nice bot, dude. And then literally a day and a half later, there was a bunch of votes for my side, like 70 votes for my side.
So who has won at this point? What's the total?
I was going to do it live just to see, but it looks like we're almost neck for neck, and I didn't have the final numbers as of today. So I don't know.
It's probably just going to be even because he's manipulating the system.
Yeah, I think he is. And now we've spammed Twitterverse with Hornsby and no Hornsby stuff.
And he is completely missing today, conveniently enough.
Conveniently missing. Yeah. Well, let's talk about more exciting news. Okay, Michelle. So here's what we got. Black Hat training. Sold out. Done. I mean, you can't even get in. As a matter of fact, we got people emailing and begging, and we just can't. We have 30 people in that class. 30 people. Are you ready for it, Michelle? Because I'm going to get sick, and you're going to do it all yourself.
There is not enough money in the world.
No, you know what? You're better off without him.
Ouch.
It'll go a lot smoother.
Ouch.
There won't be any interruptions. Tiger mom. You're gonna be a tiger. You're gonna be a tiger teacher.
This really hurts. Really hurts bad. I like Michelle's answer better, but regardless, I'm not gonna get sick. I'm not gonna be there. Then we also have a class at Derby, which is our 2-day OSINT class that we just came out with, and that's sold out.
Out. Yep.
Are you ready for that one?
No, I'm not going to be there.
That hurts. That hurts real bad. You know, this is the problem.
Doing the class at USA by herself, so you can do the one at Derby by yourself.
This is the problem, okay, with employees today. They just tell their employers what they will and won't do. Isn't that just a shame?
But they will and will not do.
Yeah.
Well, are you just empowering her to do that? Your employees to do that?
Of course I am.
Well, then you are the only one to blame.
Yeah, thanks. I knew you'd turn it around. I knew you would. I appreciate it. So anyhow, Black Hat, Derby, both sold out. Now, there's only one more chance in 2015 if you want public training from us, and that is Baltimore, Maryland. And I will give you the date before Ping yells at me for not giving you the date.
But wait, which class is it? Now you have 2 classes.
Yes, it is the APSE class, the Advanced Practical Social Engineering class, 5 days. Baltimore, Maryland, October 5 through 9, 2015. There are still a few seats left in that class, so if you are interested, probably now's the time because we seem to be selling out everywhere. Now, I'm not going to get deep into it, but I do got to tell you a little bit about 2016 schedule because I think it's only fair. Michelle and I have not yet solidified the schedule, but like Ping just said, we have 2 classes now. So we have our 5-day APSE, our 2-day advanced OSINT for social engineers. And both of those classes need to be held publicly throughout the year. Plus, we're launching our master's level SE class. So we are seriously thinking, do I even go this far? Michelle, do I even go this far to mention what I'm seriously thinking?
Go ahead. You've opened the door.
Okay. I am seriously thinking of reducing the APSE public offerings to only 3. Make the OSINT class for 2 and maybe the master's class for 1 or 2 for next year. So there's a good chance in the next month or 2 when we announce the 2016 schedule that there will only be 3 opportunities for the APSE class in 2015, maybe the last time to get it the 4 times for the year. So my suggestion is to, get in Baltimore.
So the question I have is, does that include when you train at Black Hat?
It does.
Okay, so it's fairly limited offering, people.
Yeah, we are counting Black Hat as a real training because it is. It is the full deal. So when we go there, it's a week of 30 people in a class, and we're thinking of making one in Europe, like the UK, and then only one more in the US, somewhere on the East Coast, either Orlando or Baltimore or something like that. And then, of course, picking 2 locations for our OSINT class, maybe one being at Derby and one being somewhere else in the US. And then we'll have 2 classes for our master's level. So
days of nonstop fun.
Yes, family fun for years to come. Now, some other big news. Our CFP just closed. Call for papers for DEF CON 23. It is closed, and we have way more submissions than we anticipated. I was whining to Ping, and she basically told me stop whining because she dealt with that like 300 times more. But this is our first year, guys, so have pity on us. We have to choose between all of these amazing speeches, and many of them are really, really good. I mean, I'm looking through them and I'm like, dang, this is going to be a hard choice. Not easy at all.
When do you expect to have your decisions made?
Well, I have to have them made by June 20th. They must be made by June 20th. So we will be announcing probably in mid-June the speech schedule on the .org and who will be getting in and who will unfortunately not. That will be sent to their emails before we publicly announce it, of course. In addition, we closed our CTF. SECTF event is now closed, so all of the submissions are in. We have way more hits on that page than I ever anticipated. We're over 800,000 hits on that page. Dozens and dozens of submissions, and we ended with way more than multiple handfuls of great videos to choose from. So we're hoping to choose somewhere between 10, 12 or so great contestants out of our choices and then have them compete. So we'll be announcing that also mid-June. Kids event is getting launched.
We should mention sponsors and all of that good stuff.
Okay, so kids event, we're launching that sign up. It will be in June. So sometime mid-June it will be getting launched, and we are still looking for sponsors for the SECTF for kids. So if your company is interested in being a sponsor, whether it's with swag or some money or help out with other things, please email me, Logan at social-engineer.org. Probably even better is SECTF at social-engineer.org. This year, we are going to limit the amount of seats available for the kids CTF, the SECTF for kids. We're probably going to limit it to 24, keep it more manageable, and also because we're doing some special things with ticketing and stuff like that, which we'll announce later, we want to make sure we keep it at a manageable number. So watch for that. We'll Twitterize it, and it will be on the page coming up in the next couple of weeks. So you want to get your kids in there.
That's the word of the day, Twitterize.
It should be socialized.
I'm Twitterizing. I'm done with proselytizing and socializing. I'm now Twitterizing. Okay?
That's not your only venue.
I know.
You use your Facebook and the interwebs.
Well, Jess does the whole Facebook thing. I Twitterize stuff.
Okay, all right, fine.
Okay, now we have to mention our sponsors that are already sponsoring our events, our SECTF and the SC Village. I got yelled at for that phrase before, but yes.
All right, the mature audience.
The mature audience one. We have Pin Drop Security. They do a lot of phone-based security, really interesting company. You can check out their link on our page on the .org with Pin Drop Security. Fishline, it is our premier fishing tool that we use. We love those guys. A really good company, and they're sponsoring this year. Trusted Sec, of course, can't do anything without Dave, it seems like, except for podcasts because he never shows up. But, Dave is always with us there in his group, which is now like half of the industry. His group is like everybody in our industry. It seems like he's hiring one at a time. He tried to hire Michelle last podcast right out from under me.
Promised me a cat suit and lasers. I mean, what's a girl to do?
Well, but see, he hasn't produced them.
That's true. That is so true.
In the meantime, I produced you nursing outfit and a stethoscope. So, come on. Seriously.
Yeah, not that kind of nursing outfit. Just to clarify.
I mean, what kind of that's the best pretext on earth. That's all I can say. So we're excited about all our sponsors for the CTF and for the SE Village. Keep checking back on the site. We have a Thursday event, which is going to be really, really awesome. CTF calls happening both Friday and Saturday. CTF for kids happening all day Saturday. And speeches in the village every day, Friday and Saturday, Friday and Saturday after the SECTF event is over. Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday is our live podcast. So it's going to be a pretty packed event, and there may be some other surprises on the horizon. We'll see. Okay, let's get to our guest. So if you can remember way back, if you're a fan of the podcast, in 007, you can imagine that, podcast 007, we had a guest, Ellen Langer, Dr. Langer. Dr. Langer is a professor of psychology at the Harvard University, and she was the first woman ever to be tenured in psychology at Harvard. She studies control, decision-making, aging, and mindfulness theory. Now, way back in 007 podcast, we talked all about her mindfulness theory and how it worked on influence and controlling our own thoughts. And she's got some brand new research out. And we reached out to her after reading some of her newer publications and asked her to come back on the show. And, I couldn't have planned this. I wish I could say I was a genius and I planned it this way. Maybe I should say I'm a genius and I planned it this way, but no one would believe it. And I'm sure Ping, you'll set them straight shortly. So 007 was her first one, and now 70 she's back on. So I don't know. It just seems a little unique to me. No one else? No one else? Just me?
Lucky 7, but, it was just luck and pure coincidence.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
First bubble.
I'm not as special as I once thought I was.
But I can pretend that you are. Wow,
Thanks.
Chris, great planning.
That, it just hurts. It just hurts when you do it, Payne. It just hurts. That's all I gotta say. So, we're back with our guest, Dr. Ellen Langer. Ellen, thanks for coming back on the show.
My pleasure.
So, first of all, excited to have you back. It's been about 5 years, or a little over 5 years since you were on the show last, and you've done a ton of research since we talked last time. But maybe for some of the new listeners, you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and the research that you did, and that will help explain why you're here with us today.
Oh, my goodness. Where to start? Let's see. I've been on the faculty at Harvard since 1977, a very long time. I've been researching mindlessness and mindfulness since the early 70s. And the field at that time, in the 70s, was studying, it was called the cognitive revolution. So colleagues were looking at what people were thinking, when they were thinking this way or that way, and so on. And I stopped and thought, well, are people thinking at all? And that began a lot of the work that I've continued even through today. Lots of the work started in the area of health, and that's continued over all this time as well. One of the things that the research made clear to me is that mindlessness is pervasive. Most of us, almost all the time, are simply not there. And as I'm fond of saying, when you're not there you're not there. So everybody thinks that they're mindful. Turns out that we're not, and it's at a great cost to us. And one of the other topics that I did very early research on was the importance of control, the importance of perceived control. And if you're not mindful, you're not going to perceive that you have any control. And indeed, you won't have any control because the past is determining all of your current behavior. Another thing that I had started in the 70s that I've continued through all these years is looking at the elderly. And my approach there has always been to question whether the debilitations, the negative changes that we tend to see as we get older are wired in or, in fact, are a function of the environment. So what we've done, study after study, is we would subtly change external stimuli, and we'd find that almost all of these debilitations are learned rather than innate. Another thing that I had studied from the beginning is decision making. And that started with work that I did originally on choice. So it's interesting to me because before you asked me this, I didn't realize that I was quite as consistent as it turns out I am.
I'm really fascinated with the age study because I read some of the studies, especially with changing the whole environment. And I know last time we spent the whole podcast talking about your mindfulness theory and your mindfulness research, because actually everything you do is fascinating to us. And I don't want to jump in, and I know the ladies got a lot of questions too. But on the one thing with the aging study you did, I read that you actually took a person who was experiencing some massive problems with their health, and you put them in a place that looked like their apartment that they lived in when they were younger and healthier.
Well, that's sort of true. What we did was take men who were in their 80s, and this was back in 1979, so that's when 80 was 80, not the new 60. I mean, they were old. They weren't infirm, though. They were just experiencing the normal decrements that people believe come with age. And we had them live for a week in a retreat that we had retrofitted to 20 years earlier. Everything in that retreat was as if it was that earlier time. We had them speak about topics that were current at that time, but they were speaking about them in the present tense. So basically, for them, it was 1959. And after living in this place for a week where they were going to be making their own meals, having discussions, watching television programs from the past, and so on, we found, and the findings actually are pretty remarkable. We got an improvement in vision, an improvement in hearing, an improvement in cognitive abilities, strength. What we also did was to take photographs of people before they went to the retreat, and then we took photographs again after they had been there for the full time, and showed them to people who had no idea about the study and just had them rate how old they looked. And they looked significantly younger. Now, they didn't look 20 years younger, but still noticeably younger. And that particular study has been replicated in a way, not experimentally quite as rigorously, but by the BBC in London with British celebrities, and in the Netherlands and in South Korea. So very different cultures all coming to the same conclusion, which essentially is that if we prime people's younger selves, they behave accordingly. And that was the first test of my mind-body unity theory. The mind-body unity theory is very, very simple. Basically, I argued that, and still do, that whether you take it literally or just for heuristic purposes, that if we put the mind and body back together, then wherever we're putting the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. That explains things like placebos, spontaneous remissions, and the findings I just described to you. We put the mind in a younger place and the body cooperated. And prior to this, the dominant theme has always been, or since Descartes, a mind-body dualism. That we have these two things, a mind and a body, which raise the question of how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought in the mind to something material, something real, the body. And when we put them back together, that problem goes away. So much more recently, we have done several studies to test the same theory, some with old people, some with young people, and so on.
So did that same theory apply, let's say not with age, but let's just take any person, a younger person, and you put them in a different environment or different clothing. Like I read this one research on something called enclothed cognition, like putting someone in clothing that they may assume a doctor or someone with higher intelligence would wear, and that now affects their ability to be more thoughtful or more intelligent or more thorough.
Yeah, it all depends on the original understanding of the clothing in that instance. So if you put somebody in a doctor's uniform and they didn't have any respect for doctors, you won't get the effect. But yes, it's true at all ages. I mean, more recently we did a study. I probably talked about it on our last call, but a study with chambermaids. This was very interesting to me because chambermaids, these are the women who do make beds, do all the cleaning in hotels. When we first asked them, did they get any exercise? They said they didn't. And that's because the Surgeon General defines exercise as what you do after work. Now, the first thing that came to mind was, well, if these women are exercising all day long and exercise is good for you, they should be healthier than people who are from the same socioeconomic background, but who don't do that exercise. It turned out they weren't, in fact, even slightly less healthy. Then what we did was to divide them into two groups. And the important group, the experimental group, what we did was to teach them that their work was like exercise. We showed them that making a bed was similar to working on this or that machine at the gym and so on. So at the end we have two groups. One group who doesn't think they're getting any exercise, the other group who now believes that their work is exercise. We took many measures before we started. When we came back, I think it was 3 months later, but I'm not sure. It might have just been a month. We took the measurements again. And we asked things like, are you eating any more or less than you did before? Is she working any harder, any less hard, and so on? All the things we could think of. And on those sorts of questions, there were no differences between the groups. But for the important measures, we found that the group that now changed their mindset to believe that they were getting exercise, they lost weight, there was a significant change in waist-to-hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down, which we believe, of course, was a function of this mind-body unity. In another study we did shortly after that, we played with the snowing vision chart. Everybody has gone to the doctor and they read these letters, and the letters on the chart, as you know, get smaller and smaller. Well, when I look at that chart, what it tells me is that soon I'm not going to be able to see. So what we did was to turn the chart around so that now the letters were getting progressively larger, thereby creating the expectation that soon you would be able to see, and people could see what they couldn't see before. Then many people have the belief that around 2/3 of the way down the chart, you're going to really start having trouble. So what we did was to start the chart 1/3 of the way down, meaning that 2/3 of the way down, the letters are going to be much, much smaller than what you're used to. And again, people could see what they couldn't see before. And part of that became very important in all of the health work that I've done since then. That was even begun, as I said before, back in the 70s. It suggests to me how bizarre so many parts of the medical world are. Imagine you go into a doctor's office, you're looking at black and white letters that make no sense, out of any meaningful context, and then you're given a number, and then you assume that that's how you see. And it occurred to me that if I'm hungry, I can see the restaurant sign at that's far away much sooner than if I'm not hungry. In the morning, I see differently than in the afternoon. When I'm happy, I probably see differently when I'm sad, and so on. And so a lot of the new work is all about, this is a code word in part for mindfulness, which is attention to variability.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I want to just ask a question on that, because you're like, in essence, you're saying that you had a massive effect on a physical disability, someone not being able to see, let's say, and now because you realigned the chart and their expectations were different, they're now seeing things that previously would have been impossible for them to see.
Yes, I love the way you exaggerate my findings. It's very appealing to me. But that these people that we tested were normal folk. They weren't people who were almost blind. Just for Tom, Dick, and Jane, who might be listening, they go to the doctor, and what happens is their expectations will lead it to seem that they can't see what, in fact, if we change their minds, they could see.
Yes.
Again, that our expectations rule, and we have far more control over virtually everything, but in this instance, our health and well-being and vision, in particular here.
So, Dr. Langer, would you say that this then this relates to certainly how a situation is framed or how information is framed, but would this also be an effect of being able to focus someone's attention as well?
Well, it's interesting. Now, just as Chris was exaggerating the findings, you're belittling them. I'm joking. The short answer is yes, but the effects are more dramatic than just focusing attention would lead people to understand.
I'll be your marketing person if you need to, by the way.
I just thought it was a really, really fascinating point because this reminds me of a lot of the studies that have done just on sort of attentional deficits as well. The information is there and it's present, and people can look straight at something and not see it.
Yeah, well, we did actually also back in the 70s. I guess I was very active then. We did research where we would give people simple things. For example, you might be given an index card that said, Mary had a little lamb. But it didn't say that. It would say, Mary had a little lamb. Or I love Paris and the springtime. And we'd ask people to read it, and they would read it, leaving out the double word. We would then tell them we would pay them for being accurate, and they would still leave out that word. They simply didn't see it. You don't see what your expectations determine basically what you see. So yes, that's very clever of you. That follows directly from what I was saying about the vision chart.
That's fascinating.
So, Dr. Langer, I have a question about if you've seen any changes in people's mindfulness now that they're completely inundated by all of their personal electronic devices.
Well, it's interesting. I was on this radio show in South Africa, and the person asked me, what do I think about kids on these gadgets all day long, expecting me to say, which I think is probably also what you're expecting me to say, that these gadgets are promoting mindlessness rather than mindfulness. And my answer to him at that point was that I believe, I don't have data, but I believe that if a person, whether young or old, is given a choice of a nurturing, interesting, supportive, happy conversation, or time to be on their smartphones, playing some game, they would choose the conversation. And that as parents, rather than putting all sorts of limits on children's use or people's use of these gadgets, what they need to do is up the game. You want the kids to pay attention because it's meaningful to them, not because they're ordered to do so. I don't think gadgets, information, determine how mindful or mindless we are. People also have asked me so many times, what are people to do now that there's so much information out there? And my answer to them is that in some very real way, there's no more information now than there ever was. You could spend a lifetime just looking at a blade of grass if you were so inclined. What's different is that people think that they have to process all of this information. And what a study that I keep saying I'm going to do, but I haven't gotten around to it, is to test the hypothesis that you actually don't do better with more information. More information is just more information. There's no natural endpoint to the amount of information you could take in. And so I don't think that the gadgets have led us to problems.
So do you think
I think they're wonderful, actually.
So do you think that we're more mindful as a people today than we were back in the 70s when you started this research, or less so?
Yes. No, I think so, but I don't think it's because of the gadgets, because the gadgets can be used mindfully or mindlessly. One can engage in intellectual activities. You can read a book mindlessly or mindfully. You can watch television mindfully or mindlessly. No matter what you're doing, you can always do it in one of these two ways with very important consequences endemic to one way versus the other.
So what has made the big difference, do you think, in making people more mindful today?
Yeah. No, Chris, what I expected you to say was that it was because of the 5 books on mindfulness that I've written and 200 articles.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Do you think that because of the amazing research that has altered people's lives that you have done, that we have become more mindful as a culture?
Well, Chris, modestly, let me say that I hope that I've played a part in that. You know, I think that there are several things that have come together at this point in time. One is a lot of research by myself, and others as well. The next thing I think plays into everything is that the population is aging, and baby boomers are different from um, other groups at the same age in the past for several reasons. One is that there are more of us than have ever been around. 2 is that we're a highly educated group. 3, since people are living longer, you have baby boomers taking care of elderly parents. And all of that together leads people to say, well, wait a second. There's got to be more to all of this. You know, I don't want to age the way my parents are aging. People have already had their families. They've achieved whatever they're going to achieve more than not in their work situation. And yet they're looking at many years going forward. And I think that people are making decisions about how they want to spend those years. So when you take people primed in this way and they become aware of some of this work, that I think that it moves everything along to what I believe is the beginning of an evolution in consciousness. Right now, you can't pick up a magazine without seeing the word mindful. And I got a call the other day by somebody very different from you, Chris. This was somebody who was doing a PhD in some business school and asked me if I thought mindfulness was a fad. I said, what, like the hula hoop or the pet rock? And I explained to her that let's assume that every morning you make toast for yourself and you burn the toast. And then I or somebody else comes along and shows you that all you need to do is turn this little dial here down a bit and you'll never burn the toast again. Unless you have a strong preference for burnt toast, people are never going to burn the toast again. You know, it's sort of, we go back to Plato, you know, in caves, or what is the song, how you're going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Tyree. It's all the same thing. Once you see, you're not going to go back. So we have more and more people waking up and more and more people studying this. And then we reach the tipping point.
Let's talk a little bit about your research into decision making, because for us in our industry, this is probably one of the biggest things that we have to talk about when it comes to security-based education. There's really no plug-in or fix you can put into a human. So it's the ability to teach them to make wiser decisions or better decisions, more secure decisions. Maybe you could tell us a little about your research into decision making.
Well, you know, I knew you were going to ask me this when I threw it out 15 minutes ago. And I was almost sorry that I did, because it's a little complicated. And I don't think you're going to get the answer that you want, which is, here's how you fix the whole problem. But basically, the mindful theory of mindful decision making is, again, very simple. All decisions are between or among alternatives that are different or alternatives that are the same. If they're the same, it doesn't make any difference which one you choose. If they're different, articulating the difference usually leads to a mechanical choice. If I say to you, do you want A or B? You have no idea what's A, what's B. If I say to you, do you want $100 or $1,000? You don't do any intense calculation. You just say you want 1,000. So what decision making tends to be is gathering information to make A and B come to look like $100 and $1,000. Or I'm saying you gather information until the alternatives are no longer the same, and then the decision follows directly. I'm suggesting that there's no cost-benefit analysis. There's no intense calculation that goes on. Now, the problem is that there's always some new piece of information that could change the sense of the decision that you made. You know, you're trying to decide between buying this home or that home. And you look at it and say, oh, wait a second, this home over here is a little larger and it's smaller and it's not so far from the school, and I could have my office over here. You go through all of this and say, okay, I'm going to buy this home. This is after you've really studied all of the information. And then you find out that they're going to build an airport close by, in which case it's going to be very noisy, and it wouldn't be the option that you want. There's always more information. So there's no natural endpoint to the information you could consider, and each piece of information could change the sense of the decision. Now you add to that outcomes are neither positive nor negative. Most people think that outcomes are fixed. You know, that money is good, opium is bad, you know, whatever. I'm surprised that that's the example that came to mind.
We'll go with it, though.
Okay. But you know, Epictetus has said way back when, not in English, but that events don't cause stress. What causes stress are the views you take of events. And it's the same thing with respect, basically saying events are neither positive nor negative. You can look at it as positive or look at it as negative. Every single event, every single characteristic a person has. Is that person impulsive? Well, they're spontaneous. Are they gullible? Well, they're trusting. Are they boring? Well, they're stable. And so on and so forth. So when you recognize that every outcome cuts both ways, then you certainly can't do a cost-benefit analysis, because if everything is both positive and negative, it's going to add to zero. So we have lots of economists, behavioral economists studying decision-making to take people apart in some way for not doing a cost-benefit analysis when people are doing exactly what they should be doing, because nothing else makes much sense. So then, where does that leave us? I think a pithy conclusion is, rather than spend your time trying to make the right decision, what you should be doing is making the decision right.
So
that's a bumper sticker for you.
And that's actually not as bad of an answer as you said it would be, because like I'm applying this to our industry, right? One of the big things that we do is we work with companies to educate employees on the dangers of phishing emails. And in essence, if I back up and, you know, take what you said, which is that a person's going to make a decision based on information presented to them. If you control the flow of information, then you can also help them make wiser decisions.
No, what I'm saying is that the wisdom of the decision comes in the way you frame it, not in the actual choice. So, for example, in a phishing instance, that by my opening myself up to information that's going to be destructive, that may be the very key that tells us who's been behind this whole thing. Right? The only way you're going to find the culprits is by having instances of their culpability. Not a compelling example.
No. And again,
let's go back to heroin and money.
Okay.
Much more relatable. Much more.
No, I think I get what you're saying. It's just I probably did a bad job at explaining the position because, in essence, someone in a corporation may not even know what a phishing email is. And our job is to not only educate them about what a phishing email looks like, but then the proper actions to take when they get one or when they have any email that is suspicious. So that way they don't fall victim to an attack from a malicious actor that is trying to, hack their bank accounts or something like that.
But I think a better alternative solution would be at a level higher up to find a way of programming the computers, their emails, so that they become, so they're not vulnerable to.
Yeah, if someone can figure that out, they'd be a very rich person because there's to date no technology that can stop a targeted phishing attack.
Thank you for my new career.
Okay, there you are. If you can figure that out, then I will be your marketing person. Okay. And we'll make millions.
Well, I think to Dr. Langer's point, her reframing of a bad decision has to do with being able to find individuals who are culpable. But from the perspective of our clients, what's important is that they know where the weak points are in their human infrastructure. So I think that dovetails nicely with what Dr. Langer was saying.
Yeah, we should talk. Chris, you step back.
Okay, Michelle, go ahead. Next question.
Well, I think the whole topic of decision making is very interesting because, as you said, we make these kinds of decisions that we expect are sort of balanced and rational, but we all sort of know that we don't, because a lot of times our decisions are based on how information is framed. And also, if we are sort of leaning in one direction or another, we will justify our decisions sort of after the fact based on the information that we collect to say, oh yeah, we were smart in doing that.
So Michelle, you're very smart. That's the point that I should have made clearer. That it's not that people don't do a cost-benefit analysis. They do it after they've made their decision to make it sensible, to justify the decision.
Absolutely. I do it every day.
And what I'm saying is okay, because there's no other way to do it.
That's fantastic. Did you hear that, Chris? Dr. Langer says it's okay.
Well, because the other is an illusion of accuracy.
It doesn't work with you, so. No.
Yeah.
I think that Chris's feelings are a little bit hurt right now.
No.
Chris, I'm so sorry.
No, I'm not hurt. I'm not hurt at all. This is so over my head. I'm just trying to figure out something to say to make myself sound somewhat intelligent and not like a monkey going.
Just let Michelle speak.
All right, so let's bring the conversation to a different place.
I think it's very clear, the discussion between you and Michelle at decision making and its importance. And that is probably something that, at least in our industry, that we could focus on more, because right now, as we said, there is no technology that can be plugged in.
Well, that the example that I often use in business, and I have to find new ones because it's almost tried already, is the company that's trying to produce a glue. And it turned out that the glue failed to adhere. So you could say, by analogy to all of your people who are letting in the fishermen, that they're making all sorts of errors. And so what happens is you're producing a glue, the glue fails to adhere. At that point, what do? Well, what 3M did was to come up with the Post-it note, the very essence of which depends on its failure to adhere for a long time. So the point is that when there is an error that's made, that error is also an opportunity. And that's what most companies are missing when they then castigate the person who made the error. How can we take that and, by analogy, create a Post-it
note? Love that analogy.
That's beautiful, right? That's the training opportunity that we always speak about.
Yeah.
Right.
It kind of makes me feel good because I think we've been applying that without really maybe understanding the psychology behind it, or maybe Michelle did and I just was following along. But
well, that right now I have a new institute, the Langer Mindfulness Institute, where we have branches all over the world, and also the Langer Mindfulness Research Institute. And one of the things that we teach is innovation. That basically, in a simple way, requires that you take, for example, we go back to this glue. You wouldn't say to somebody, what do you do with a glue that fails to adhere? Because what most people would do is you say, okay, people make mistakes. You just go on to another project. You'd say instead, turn it into something positive, the positive properties. What could you do with a substance that adheres for a short amount of time? And then most people would be able to come up with some version of a Post-it note. You see, what happens is that we're so trapped in this mindlessness, this illusion of knowing, that we think that we've come to a wrong answer and that's the end of the game, not recognizing that the answer is only wrong because of the way the original problem has been framed. So you reframe the problem and the answer may be correct.
So the old adage of thinking outside the box is actually true.
Well, I prefer thinking without a box because sometimes in the box is fine. But what you want to be doing is thinking. And too often, our mindlessness, our thinking that we know, leads us to be blind. Solutions, mindful solutions that may be right in front of us.
That right there is another bumper sticker, thinking without a box. Tell me about the Mindfulness Institute that you just mentioned.
Okay, well, we have two. One that's just research-oriented. And so for the research, for example, in India, we're doing this mindfulness research with prostate cancer. And then we have in Mexico and in China, the Langer Mindfulness Research Institute, where we're doing a number of different things. We're starting work now with breast cancer, for instance. The institute itself, which much of the work is driven in South Africa. It's interesting to me, that for so many years, we found that when we make people more mindful, they live longer and they're healthier. I would have thought that insurance companies here would jump on this, right? Because you still have people paying the premium and they wouldn't be getting sick. But the companies, the large insurance companies of South Africa seem to have caught on sooner. At any rate, so we do, we have online courses, we teach innovation, leadership, we do consulting, all of it from this mindfulness perspective.
And what's the, just to people who are interested, what's the URL for that? Where can people go to get more information on that?
Yeah, LangerMindfulnessInstitute.com.
That's fascinating, actually. As far as taking some of the research that you have done and applying it to many industries, but of course, selfishly thinking about our industry and how we could tie the decision-making and creating a culture of mindfulness to help protect against attacks from malicious actors in the hacking sense.
Right. And also, one of the things that industry, that the culture seems to have gotten wrong. And you have lots of people there are business gurus who talk about work-life balance. And I think that's mindless. I think work-life balance, is certainly better than work-life imbalance. But better would be work-life integration. Why should you be a different person at work? Why should it be that you're exhausted at work, that you're stressed at work, that you pretend and are somewhat inauthentic at work? Who wants to live that kind of a life? And that the more mindful you are, the more the different parts of your life come together. So that's an important thing that we also teach. I think that starting with schools, where you have people evaluated, people like me who are given all sorts of A's only because I knew the answers to the particular questions that were asked. If other questions had been asked, who knows where I would have fallen on the curve. You have a few people who are on the tail end, yay, wonderful. A few people, awful, nothing you can do about them, and most people in the middle. And so we have kids who are brought up this way, thinking that at best they're average, probably worse than average in their own minds. And they go on and live a life, whether they're working for you or for me, or in some other company that neither of us have anything to do with, and they're not being productive the way they would otherwise be. They're not enjoying themselves. The healthcare costs are enormous. The number of accidents that take place. When, in my view, that everybody is talented, everybody is smart, it depends again on the context. So a silly example, and I think you can generalize it to business. But let's take school. So right now, if a child is asked, how much is 1 and 1? Teacher says this in class, how much is 1 and 1? And she looks at Janie, and Janie says 1. What happens is the teacher, because of the way she's been trained, or he, non-verbally makes Janie look like an idiot to the other people in the class, even if, they may in fact tell her directly, verbally, make her feel small. In the world that I'm trying to create, what would happen is the teacher would say, Janie, how did you come to that? And Janie would say, you take 1 wad of chewing gum, you add it to 1 wad of chewing gum, and 1 plus 1 is 1. And then everybody would have learned something. And they'd learn that we have to change our notion of absolutes. We all, you're taught in school, the more of these absolute facts you can learn, the more successful you'll be. And these absolutes blind you to alternatives. They also set up almost a caste system in this culture. Again, the A students become the big business leaders looking down at the people that are working for them. And rather than taking advantage of the special sets of knowledge these people may have. So I think that that's an implicit and at times explicit part of what we do, which is to show people alternative ways of understanding the people around them. And then people tend to think that whatever help you're going to give people at work should be about work. And I think that probably just as often, perhaps more often, that if you're having a fight at home and are stressed because of something at home, you're going to bring that to work and not do your best. So again, what we want to do is treat the whole person as a whole person, no matter what environment they're in, and to get them to learn how to see more of the world rather than be blinded by the mindlessness that they've incorporated up till that time in their life. And as a result, relationships are better, people are more productive, people are happier, everything good.
And how do you do it?
Well, the way we do it, there are several things, and too many to go into much detail, but the bottom line is we teach people to be more mindful. And being more mindful, we should at some point in this conversation differentiate what I do from what others do, who have now used the term liberally. For them, for many people, the way you make people more mindful is you teach them to meditate. And meditation is just a tool, a good tool, but it's just a tool. Ours is mindfulness without meditation. And basically what we try to teach people is that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception. And when you're certain, what you're doing is being mindless, and that's going to blind you again to opportunities. And when you're mindful, not only are you aware of those opportunities, but you get to avert the danger not yet arisen because you're actually present. The meditation, as you know, you take 20 minutes twice a day out of your day to sit and to come to learn that your thoughts are just thoughts. The way we teach that your thoughts are just thoughts is really just bombard them. That you think X, well, how can it be Y? How can it be Z? And so on. And over time, you come to walk around confident but uncertain. The reason that you're confident is because you know that nobody else knows either, because they can't know, because everything is always changing.
So Maybe in closing, you can give us, since it sounds like you started this research. As with anything that becomes popular, you have a lot of people that, as you said, jump on the bandwagon.
No, I didn't mean to say that.
No, I get it though. I mean, it happens when you make something useful and popular. There's going to be people who want to, and I don't mean that in a negative way. And sometimes that's a great form of flattery. You see something you've worked on your whole life, and now people want to start using it and teaching it. That's flattering. What is your definition of being mindful, or your definition of mindfulness?
No, mindfulness is a simple act of noticing new things. When you notice new things, that puts you in the present, makes you sensitive to context and perspective. And as you're noticing, that's the essence of engagement. So it turns out that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. You don't need to step away from your daily routines. Your routine, you emerge the same person regardless of the context that you're in. You have social psychology. This is interesting. When I first started studying the discipline a long time ago, that the first thing you're taught is that behavior is context dependent. Who you are depends on the situation that you're in. And so I've raised the question, and it's a healthy part of what we end up teaching people, is to question who created the context. So I'll give you a simple study, not so different from the ones we talked about before that some students at Harvard did years ago. You take Asian women, and it turns out that there's a very strong stereotype that Asians are good at math. There's also a strong stereotype that women are bad at math. So they did a study where they primed their Asianness, and those women did well on the math test.
I love the phrase Asianness.
Or they primed their being women, in which case they did poorly. What I'm suggesting, it might be a nice close to our conversation, is I started with that we have an enormous amount of control over every aspect of our lives, our physical health, our happiness, our everyday activities, and certainly our work life. And that if you ask the question, who creates that context, you don't have to wait until somebody else frames the situation for you. You can frame the situation so that you can boldly go in and accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish.
And you have two Asian women on this call with you, so.
Oh, good. Okay.
There you are. So you see, you guys aren't that good at math. You see, I've been telling you that for years.
No, I am actually absolutely terrible. Like, I love geometry and algebra, but beyond that, ugh.
No, you see, but that's very important that you say that, because that's what we do with symptoms, with dispositions of ourselves and other people, is we hold it still. I'm sure that there are problems of whichever sort you said you can't do that you'd have no trouble with. Do you understand what I'm saying? That,
Yes.
People fail at something, then they make a general characterization for why they failed, and they're just not good at it. It's like people who, when somebody is depressed, they say, I'm depressed all the time. Well, nobody is anything all the time, and certainly not to equal measure. So if you tuned in to, right now I'm not depressed, for example, and then you ask the question, well, why? And then you start to get control over your life. It's the same thing with symptoms of chronic illnesses that we're doing a lot of research with. That people, you go to the doctor gives you a diagnosis. From that point forward, many people stop paying any attention to their bodies. They just do or don't do what the doctor recommended. If instead, we've done this with chronic pain, we've done this with arthritis, we're doing it with MS, we've done it with ALS, and a host of diseases. That if you tune in and you say, you experience a symptom, is it better or worse than the last time you experienced it? Then the question is why. And when you start exploring that, two things happen. One is that you're becoming more mindful while you're looking for the answer to the question. And two, you may very well find the answer. You're certainly not going to find the answer if you don't look. If you just take as a given that this is the disease I have, this is the course it's likely to take. And there's no disorder that, let me say this differently. all medical data, all data in general, doesn't matter whether it's physics, psychology, medicine, only gives probabilities. That means if we were able to repeat the exact same thing, which we couldn't do, we'd be likely to find whatever we're looking for much of the time. That's translated into absolute facts. Remember, again, when we have these absolutes, then we think we know. When we think we know, we're mindless and we don't pay attention. And then we can't change situations for ourselves.
Fascinating. I mean, it's just really, especially the thoughts about taking control of our own thinking. I've actually heard in my family similar things. I don't mean my parents and things like this, about things like, oh, I'm depressed all the time. And then that hit a resonating chord with me, and sitting back and saying, there are times when you're not, and analyzing that moment.
Right. And there are times you're not bad at math, and there are times you're, that the fishing is not going to be disastrous, and there are, and so on. And by paying attention to those subtleties, to that variability, we end up with the control that all of us are seeking. Right now, people seek out absolute facts. They want to know for certain, so that they'll feel control, but it's an illusion. Since things are changing, you want to, in fact, stay open to that. And I started to say before that once you recognize that everything is always changing for everybody, it's the nature of the beast, that you can stand tall in not knowing, because no matter how puffy this person seems to be, they don't know either.
I love it. A lot of our listeners love to read. So if you had to recommend a book or two, which ones would you recommend to our listeners?
Well, of my books, it's like asking which child you can do that.
Which child is the prettiest?
Right, it depends on the culture and the day. Last year I published, the end of last year, so very recently, the 25-year anniversary edition of Mindfulness. And that might be a good place to start. There are two other books. One that hasn't gotten the attention that it should have, and there's a funny story behind this, which is On Becoming an Artist, Reinventing Yourself Through Mindful Creativity.
I have that sitting right here on my desk.
And it's a book, it's really about interpersonal mindfulness. But what happened is, I paint. And I started to paint not around the same time that I published that book, which, by the way, has about 20 full-color photographs of my paintings. And I sent in the title, which wasn't very creative, but it was more or less accurate to the content. It was called Mindful Creativity. The publishers came back with On Becoming an Artist. Well, it was so early in my painting career that I was thrilled to be called an artist. And so what happened is, I think people think it's an art book, which it really isn't. And I just sent in the final revisions for the Power of Mindful Learning for new edition of that as well. But so I would say, to answer your question, start with the 25-year anniversary edition of Mindfulness, go to the On Becoming, and then the Counterclockwise book. The Counterclockwise book is primarily about health.
And if people want to find out more about you and your work, and I know you gave out the one URL before, but are there other websites or Twitter accounts or other things people can do to follow you?
Yes. I'm now on everything. So I have a Twitter account. I guess you just put in Ellen Langer. And same thing with Facebook. But much of this information, again, is on the Langer Mindfulness Institute.com. The original website was ellenlanger.com. If you just put my name in Google, it will take you all sorts of places, and then you can decide where you want to go. And you can't make the wrong decision, right?
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes so people can come and follow you, and I'll let you know when it's released, and you can promote it if you like on your channels, and we'll do so on our channel. This was fascinating, as it was back in podcast 07. This one was
No,
just as fascinating, if not more so.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it as well, clearly. So that's in 2020 we talk again, right?
I guess if we go that route, yeah, if we go every 5 years. So you got to do some really amazing research in between now and...
Well, I have lots of research that I didn't describe. So we could do this again next week if you'd
like. Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me now.
Anyway, it was a pleasure talking to all of you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank
Ellen.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Langer.
Okay, completely fascinating.
Awesome.
Wow.
Pretty awesome.
I wish we actually, when she mentioned she had other research, I wanted to hear about it because she really talked about a lot of things that she touches upon on her website and in her book. So it'd be interesting to get like the scoop of things that
well, we'll just have to have her back. I mean, she's one of those guests that I don't think we get bored of if we have her back.
Just timeless.
Right. She's kind of like Robin or Paul Ekman or Robin Dreek. Like I've had those guys on multiple times and the podcasts get downloaded just as much every time I have them on. They're just popular people who could talk about exciting and entertaining things. And I don't know. I don't really know how old she is, but it sounds young at heart, and I love her sense of humor and truly fascinating person.
Let's not wait another 5 years before we have her back on.
I agree with that. I really, if just like her, if you had asked me, hey, when was she on last? I would have said, like a year or two ago. And I looked, and it's 2010. I was like, no way. That's amazing. Time flies. But yeah, she's fascinating. I loved her description of being mindful and, of course, how to implement it. So hopefully everybody will enjoy this podcast just as much. Everyone but Dave, who wasn't here.
Well, if Dave had been on, and we might have been able to change the way he thinks of Bruce Hornsby. Because she's like, well, that's exactly what we're talking about. Like in math, you're not terrible at all math. There are other math help you solve well. But we might have been able to change how he thinks about Bruce Hornsby.
Make him more mindful.
His taste in music isn't all terrible.
Yeah.
Just some of it is.
Just some of it, like Bruce Hornsby.
Well,
yes, Dave. If you listen, we're all mocking you.
He will be listening to it. He'll listen, and then on the next podcast, he'll spend half an hour telling us how he's on every podcast.
Oh yeah, I love it because the one podcast you weren't on, and you had some work thing come up, and you couldn't make it, and he spent like 15 minutes bashing you. And he's like, "Oh, she's gonna bring it up next. Oh, I know it. She's gonna." And then I don't even know if you listened to it. You were traveling to Portugal and stuff, so.
No, I don't have a mental need to bring it up.
It was just funny to me because he was waiting for it and it never happened. So made me laugh.
Well, then he didn't show up, right? Or did he drop off?
I don't know. He was consistent for a good 3 or 4 podcasts, but I know the guy. Like to give him a break, all joking aside, he's hiring like 85 people a minute. His company's growing nonstop. He's got the con as well as this other company he started. It's like the guy, I don't know where he finds the time to do all the things that he does. I really don't.
He's very efficient.
He is. And he's one of these guys too that also doesn't work until like 1 or 2 in the morning.
Right. There's no one else around.
I don't know how he does it though. He doesn't work that late. He doesn't. He'll get off it and go home and just stop working. I don't know how he does it. Doesn't make sense.
He has enough minions that are doing the work for him.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe. That's good. Yeah, either way. Another great podcast. I can't think of anything else that we have to bring up, so if there's any announcements I forgot.
We'll get them next time.
Okay, then we'll get them next time. So, don't forget to check us out, social-engineer.org, or our corporate site at social-engineer.com. Our Twitter accounts are Human Hacker and SOC Engineer Inc. If you're still alive on the IRC network, you can check us out at irc.freenode.net, channel social-engineer. Oh, also, I keep getting this question. If you like the outro music, it's Clutch Gone Cold. You can check them out online. Awesome song, awesome band. Until next time, guys. See ya.
can't seem to recall any given name. I see the footprints, how they come, how they go. Was that only a moment, or many years ago? My heart is gone,